Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Sabbath to everyone here. It's great to see you all. Hope you had a wonderful week. Always great to be here on the Sabbath day to learn more about God, His ways. You know, in this day and age that we live in, and I'm talking about the last 18 months or so, I found myself, and maybe you have too, thinking one of two ways. I wish I could go back, or I wish I could go forward. That's what I want to talk about today. Because if we get caught up in this mindset, we're going to miss the things that are going on now. It's very easy to do. I live in a lot of regret because my whole life is, and for me, has been that way in a lot of aspects. Thinking back or thinking forward and not thinking in the moment. I want to begin today by reading you a poem. Consider the ice cream cake. It dazzles with color and design. Oh, praise the chefs who long labored such a dainty, so easily, so rapidly consumed. See the festoon of pink roses. In cool stillness of the frigid air, it firmly waits. Yet how it withers and melts on yon plate. Make haste to consume the ice cream. Its sweet taste cannot be held beyond the tongue. Oh, the morrow may bring us shortages or yet a dreary messenger. Who likes ice cream? Who doesn't like ice cream should be the question. Everybody likes ice cream. Now, whether ice cream likes you might be another question. A 5-layered ice cream cake is a beautiful sight to behold. When you go to Dairy Queen, you can smash your face against the freezer door and you can look at all the ice cream delicacies that you get in there, and it just looks so good. And we think about how great it would taste if we could get it out. But if we leave it out for too long and we just stare at it, it turns into a puddle of sweet cream before our very eyes. So how shall we proceed knowing our ice cream, and that is our life, is going to melt? That's the question I put before you today. Let me translate it into it this way. How shall we live knowing that life passes so quickly? Time seemed to go so slowly as a child. You may think back to yourself and think that. Have you ever heard a 12-year-old say, when I was a child, and what they meant was 6 years ago? How about an 18-year-old saying, way back in grade school, and what they meant was about 6 years ago? What is 6 years to you? Well, 6 years is nearly a blink in the eye. The older you are, the faster the blink. Right, so I stand before you today, maybe 5 or 6 blinks, if we want to call it that, out of high school. Some of you might be 10 or 11 blinks away from high school. I'm beginning to get a better glimpse of how 1,000 years can be just one day to God. You know, the older you get, the faster time passes by. I think that's because of the more cumulative experiences you gain behind you. How did this time go so fast? Where did it go for you? Ecclesiastes chapter 3, I'd like you to turn there. God is going to tell us something very important in Ecclesiastes. He's going to tell us that in life, there is a season to everything. Let's start in Ecclesiastes 3 and verse 1. He says here, to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heavens. This verse is followed with couplets of life events, and the pairing is bitter with sweet, we will see, sorrowful with joyful, destructive with constructive, because life is a seasonal cycle of events. Look at verse 2. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to pluck up, which is planted, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to break down, and a time to build up, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to get, and a time to lose, a time to keep, and a time to cast away, a time to rend, a time to sow, a time to keep silence, and a time to speak, a time to love, a time to hate, a time of war, and a time of peace. No one's life is all happiness and joy. Each life is a mixture of events, and no one escapes the cycle. But do you know what it is always time for? It's always time to enjoy ice cream. It's always time to enjoy the life that you have. The American poet Thoreau wrote that he went, quote, to suck the marrow out of life. You may have heard that quote before. All too often, we are not content with living in the now. We're either looking back with the longing for the good old days. A lot of the old timers talk about the good old days. I find myself talking about the good old days. Or we look forward to a time when we won't be in the present any longer. But then when we get to that future time, which then is the present, we look back at the past, which then was the present before, and we long to be back in the good old days, which was at one time the present, or we wish away our life into the future to a time which is not the present, and one day will be the new present, but the past good old days. Did you get all that? Either way, we skip the present. We never seem to live in the present. I remember a patient coming in my office several years ago, and he was complaining about how, she was complaining about how she couldn't, I remember she was standing right there, she couldn't wait until her baby's teeth came through so the baby would, stop fussing and they wouldn't have to get up and feed her at night and comfort the baby. It was just one of those things. She said, I just can't wait till it's over. And of course, I've heard others, and you have too, where they say they can't wait till their baby can walk so they won't have to carry him around any longer. And then others say they can't wait till their baby can talk so they won't have to hear him whine anymore. And another saying how they can't wait until their child's in school so they can have more time to themselves. And another saying how they can't wait until they can stop paying for those school supplies, back to school supplies that are so expensive. And another saying how they can't wait until their child gets an after-school job, how wonderful that's going to be. And another saying how they can't wait until they graduate and move out of the house, until they can have the house back to themselves. And yet at each phase in this life, they wished they were back to the previous phase because they missed it. Or they wanted to move on to the next phase because they weren't living in the moment now. And when it's all over, it's only then that they realize that they wish their whole children's life was away and didn't enjoy the moment to the fullest. You've probably been there before. The Apostle Paul wrote into the Philippians, I want you to turn over to Philippians chapter 4, something that to me I think is very fascinating when you consider the state in which he found himself at the time of his writing. So we know that the Apostle Paul was a prisoner during this writing in Rome, awaiting trial and unsure whether he was to be freed or whether he was to be executed. He didn't know. But under Roman bonds, he penned these words, which I think we should all listen to. Philippians chapter 4 in verse 11. Not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned in whatever state I am therewith to be content. I know how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I am instructed both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer want. Brethren, how can you be content in your state if you never live in it? How is it possible to be content if you never accept that you're in the moment? Instead, we find ourselves always longing for the past or waiting for the future, never living in the moment. I wish I could have a better house. I can't wait until I get a better job. I can't wait until I turn 18. I can't wait, I can't wait, I can't wait, is the mantra. When we're at home, we often think about our job. When we're at a job, we often think about our home. When I get my life straightened out, the saying goes, then I will help others. When I make more money, then I will tithe. When I retire, then I will spend more time with my family. A few years ago, actually just thinking about that, when then becomes the mantra, doesn't it? When then, when then. Remember a few years ago, a patient came into my office, and I'll call him, I don't even remember his name anymore, let's call him John. He'd been coming to me for, I think, about 4 years at that time. This was a few years ago. And he talked regularly about retiring. And a lot of patients talk about that, retiring. They can't look for, they can't wait until that day that they can retire. I'm there too, I get that. And then one day he came in and he said, today's the day. Tomorrow I'm retiring. And he was so excited. And I remember that he went on vacation. I think he went on a cruise at that time. And a couple days into his vacation, he contracted what he thought was a mild case of food poisoning. But the food poisoning case that he thought he had continued. And so he went to the doctor, and they discovered that he had renal failure just a few days after he retired. And he said, oh, by the way, you have multiple myeloma as well, which is a near-death sentence. So he came into my office shortly after that, and I remember he looked really, really pale, and he was very weak, and he had lost a few teeth, I think from some of the chemo that he was going through, and he was walking very slowly due to his frail condition because of the cancer. But I remember when he sat down and we talked, and he said, Doc, this is not how I planned my retirement to be. I didn't plan for it to go this way. I expected to do so many things in my life, but now I can't do any of them. And he never did. He never did. When I get my life organized, then I'll study the Bible more. When I get this project done, then I'll pray more. When I get all this cluttered, cleaned up, then I'll fast more. The truth is, brethren, that life never gets organized enough for us. Our projects never seem to get done, and our clutter never gets cleaned up because, I don't know, we always seem to add things to put back into the empty space that we've cleaned up. So, when then? Again, we come back to is our mantra in life. The fact of the matter is, I think we all live with regrets. I can't imagine anybody hasn't lived their life without a regret, which is certainly the case, I think, with the Apostle Paul when he said this. He said he learned. He learned, which means he didn't know at the beginning. He learned to be content in whatever state he found himself. So the good news is, if we haven't yet learned, then we can take Paul at his word and we can put into practice his experience from so many years ago. So how much marrow are you sucking out of life at this moment? If we just moved to the next bone, then contentment escapes us, and we've left the marrow behind. Stick around. Enjoy everything in the moment you're in, and then you'll live life to the fullest contentment. So how shall we live knowing our ice cream is going to melt? Shall we serve it on chilled plates with chilled utensils? Shall we eat it quickly and get headaches? Or could we lay aside our contrived schemes, accept the transitory nature of ice cream that we call life, and enjoy the fleeting moments of sheer delight we get from it before it all simply melts away?